The city burned in silence. Not the kind of silence born of peace, but the hollow quiet that comes when screams have run dry, when throats are too raw to beg for mercy and hope has long since crumbled to ash. The skies above Velar Prime boiled with alien fire. Jagged silhouettes of warships, colossal, scaled things bristling with weapons, hung in low orbit like vultures circling carrion. Every hour, another lance of plasma descended, turning streets into molten rivers and towers into skeletal remains. For the people below, there was no strategy, no hidden miracle. They had fought. Gods, they had fought. Brave pilots had risen from the hangars in fighters built from outdated schematics, patched together with desperation and prayer. They had streaked into the sky, wings burning, hearts fierce. And one by one, they had been swatted from existence, scattered like embers in a hurricane. Now only the resistance remained, a cluster of ragged defenders crouched in the ruins of the governor's citadel. A shell of marble and steel stood around them, blackened by firestorms, its grand halls now choked with smoke and dust. The resistance commander, General Los Vaynar, stood before a broken window, staring into the apocalyptic horizon with a face carved from grief. "They've stopped firing," whispered one of the younger soldiers, voice trembling. "Why? Why stop now?" General Vaynar didn't answer immediately. He studied the enemy ships lingering in the ash-colored heavens. He knew the answer, though he wished he didn't. The invaders were not halting for mercy, they were savoring the end, letting despair sink deep into the marrow of their prey. "It is their way," Vaynar said at last, his voice hoarse. "They want us to feel it. To know that no one is coming. That this world is theirs." A silence heavier than the smoke settled over the battered room. The soldiers looked at each other, eyes sunken, uniforms torn. Some were barely out of adolescence, pulled from farms and factories when the first bombardments began. Others were veterans who had fought in wars long forgotten, their hands still steady but their spirits near breaking. The truth gnawed at them all, the galaxy would not come. The Interstellar Council had signed the treaties, sworn oaths of neutrality, looked away as Velar burned. No aid fleets would breach the void, no banners of liberation would rise on the horizon. They were alone. Vaynar closed his eyes, listening to the crackle of distant fires. He remembered his daughter's face, her laughter in the gardens of their home before the sky had turned red. He had sworn to her that their people would endure. Yet as the silence deepened, he wondered if he had lied. "General," came a voice from the comm station. The operator's hands shook as he clutched the sputtering console. They've issued another broadcast." Vaynar turned, his jaw tight. "Play it." The speakers hissed to life, filling the ruined hall with the guttural resonance of the invaders. Their tongue was thick with venom, translated by the Resistance's cracked systems. "People of Velar. Your resistance is meaningless. Your leaders are broken. Your fleets are dust. Surrender now, and some of you may yet live as slaves. Defy us, and every last ember of your world will be extinguished. Know this, no ally comes. No salvation waits beyond the void. You are abandoned." The broadcast ended in static. A soldier slammed his fist against the wall, leaving blood on the cracked marble. Another sank to her knees, whispering prayers that no longer seemed to reach the stars. Vaynar stood tall, though his chest ached with the weight of their despair. He would not let them see him falter. "They want our spirit," he said, voice iron. "Let them choke on it. If this is to be our end, we give it to them not as broken slaves, but as warriors." The words were brave, but even as he spoke them, he saw the hollow looks in his soldiers' eyes. The fire of defiance burned low. And deep inside, a small, bitter part of him believed the invaders were right. No one was coming. Beyond the citadel, the night deepened. Smoke obscured the stars, and the low hum of enemy engines filled the sky. Velar Prime's once vibrant capital had become a tomb waiting to be sealed. Hours passed in uneasy quiet. Wounded groaned softly in the corners, medics worked with dwindling supplies, and guards watched the skies with hollow stares. Every creak of stone, every distant boom of collapsing structures echoed like a death knell. Vaynar sat alone for a time, his hands folded, his mind adrift between memory and duty. He thought of the legends, the old tales whispered by smugglers and drifters, stories of humanity. A species from a forgotten spiral arm, whispered to have risen from their cradle in defiance of empires, wielding warships carved from nightmares. But those were stories told in bars and trenches, myths too wild to cling to. And yet, as the silence deepened, he found himself clinging anyway. He lifted his gaze to the smoke-choked heavens, whispering a prayer not to his gods, but to the void itself. Then, a sound. At first, it was so faint it might have been mistaken for thunder. But thunder did not roll through the vacuum above. The guards stirred. Soldiers looked up from their despair. The sound grew, a low, resonant hum, deep and primal, vibrating through the stone beneath their boots. Vaynar's heart stuttered. From the ash-streaked sky, a light broke through the smoke. Not the sickly red of enemy plasma, but something colder, sharper. It shimmered, then flared, splitting the heavens with impossible brilliance. The soldiers staggered to their feet, staring in disbelief. The invaders' ships moved suddenly, shifting in formation, their calm predatory stillness broken for the first time. Warning sirens screeched across the enemy fleet. And then, out of the void, something roared. A silhouette emerged, vast and terrible, its hull etched with lines of fire as it tore through the blockade. It was not sleek like the alien craft, but brutal, angular, forged from defiance itself. The very air seemed to shudder at its arrival. A warship. And stamped across its dark armor, visible even through the smoke, were the symbols no one on Velar had ever thought they'd see in reality. The insignia of humanity. For a moment, no one breathed. The colossal vessel tore through the smoke-choked sky like a god descending from forgotten myths. Its hull was scorched black, angular, bristling with weapons unlike anything Velar's defenders had ever seen. Energy shields rippled across its surface, shimmering as enemy fire lanced toward it. Yet the beams dissolved against its armor as though striking the heart of a star. "By the stars," a young soldier whispered, her voice trembling with awe. "It's real." General Vaynar could not move. His war-worn eyes, dulled by too many defeats, now burned as he stared at the impossible. Legends had become steel before him. Humanity, a name spoken in hushed tones, a species banished to rumor and cautionary tales, was here. The human warship's engines growled like thunder across the heavens, its presence a defiance etched into reality itself. The invaders stirred. Their formation tightened, warships breaking into attack vectors, surrounding the newcomer like predators circling an intruder. Dozens of plasma lances stabbed toward the lone human vessel, carving through the night. The sky lit up. The human warship answered. With a single flash, its forward batteries unleashed a torrent of light, beams so bright they seared shadows into the rubble below. One alien cruiser disintegrated instantly, its core erupting in a blossom of white fire. Another split apart, hulls cracking as though struck by an invisible hammer. The resistance soldiers roared, voices rising in disbelief and triumph. For the first time in endless days, their cries were not of pain, but of hope. Vaynar clenched the edge of the ruined window, watching as the impossible unfolded. "They came," he whispered, hardly believing the words. "By every star left burning, they came." The comms operator scrambled at the controls, voice frantic. "General, the warship, its signals, it's broadcasting on an open channel. Put it through." Vaynar barked. The console crackled. Then, through the static, a voice thundered across every speaker, deep and commanding, carrying the weight of war. "This is the Terran warship Aegis. Resistance forces of Velar Prime, hold your ground. You are not alone. Humanity stands with you." The hall erupted. Soldiers who had been broken minutes before now wept openly, clutching each other, shouting, praying. The sound was raw, alive, defiant. Hope had returned, not as a whisper, but as a roar. Outside, the battle intensified. Alien warships surged forward in fury, unleashing volleys of fire that scorched the skies. But the Aegis moved with predatory grace, its hull shimmering as it twisted through the storm. Every return volley shattered enemy lines, each blast a declaration: humanity had not come quietly. Humanity had come to fight. The invaders faltered. For centuries they had crushed worlds, unchallenged in their supremacy. Yet here was one ship, one, and their fleet reeled before it. But they were not broken yet. An enemy dreadnought advanced, vast as a city, its cannons glowing with lethal energy. Its shadow fell across the capital, blotting out the pale stars. The Aegis turned to meet it. General Vaynar's heart pounded as he watched the two titans face one another, fire dancing across the void between them. The dreadnought's cannons screamed, hurling plasma storms that could tear continents apart. The Aegis weathered the onslaught, shields flaring, armor scorched, but it did not falter. Then, with a roar like the breaking of worlds, the human ship fired its main gun. The beam was not fire. It was annihilation. A lance of searing white carved across the void, piercing the dreadnought's heart. For one breathless instant, the massive warship hung suspended, trembling as if in denial of its death. Then it split apart, erupting into a supernova of debris. The people of Velar screamed in triumph, voices echoing through the ruins. Yet Vaynar knew this was not victory, not yet. For every enemy ship destroyed, more loomed beyond the smoke, shadows of the invader fleet pressing forward. The Aegis was mighty, but it was one against many. Its defiance could ignite hope, but could it endure? General. The comms officer turned, eyes wide. They're requesting coordinates. They want us to mark remaining resistance positions. Do it. Vaynar barked. If they're willing to cover us, we'll rally what's left of our forces. Send everything we have, troop movements, bunker locations, supply caches. Give them everything. The orders flew, crackling through battered consoles. And outside, the Aegis shifted its fire, intercepting bombardments that would have reduced resistance strongholds to ash. Where plasma rained, human counterfire roared, intercepting, deflecting, shielding. The impossible was happening, they were being protected. Vaynar watched as streaks of light burst across the city's horizon, drop pods. They screamed through the atmosphere like falling stars, slamming into the ruins with earth-shaking force. Hatches hissed open, and armored figures emerged. Soldiers, clad in exosuits marked with the Terran insignia. They moved with precision, weapons bristling, eyes burning with a fury that was almost personal. The battlefield shifted. Alien infantry who had prowled the ruins now faced warriors unlike any they had ever encountered. Humanity did not fight with hesitation or mercy. They struck with a precision born of countless wars, their weapons carving through enemy ranks with brutal efficiency. Every shot was a promise: no more worlds would burn unchallenged. In the citadel, the resistance soldiers stared at their screens, disbelief washing over them. Vaynar felt tears sting his eyes as he realized, this was no dream, no hallucination of a dying man. Humanity was real, and they had come not with words, but with fire. Yet beneath the surge of hope, dread coiled in his chest. The Aegis was powerful, yes, but the enemy fleet was vast, stretching far beyond Velar's orbit. What if this was not salvation, but a spark that would be drowned in a storm? The human commander's voice cut once more through the comms, steady and unyielding. General Vaynar, rally your people. This fight isn't over. But hear me, no world stands alone, not while humanity sails the void. Today, Velar stands. Today, we remind the galaxy, tyranny falls when humans rise. The word struck like thunder. Even the most broken of soldiers straightened, their despair burned away. The skies were still aflame, the enemy still vast, but the tide had shifted. Hope had returned not as a fragile flame, but as a storm. General Vaynar's voice rose above the chaos, fierce and unrelenting. Then let's make the bastards bleed. The war for Velar Prime was no longer one-sided. It had become something far greater. A beginning. The sky was a storm of fire. The Aegis carved through the enemy fleet, every volley of its cannons tearing apart cruisers that had once reigned unchallenged. Its shields flared like a second sun, bending under the fury of plasma storms yet refusing to shatter. Below, in the shattered capital, human drop troops and Valoran resistance fighters fought shoulder to shoulder, their cries of defiance echoing through the ruins. For the first time since the invasion began, the people of Velar did not fight to delay the inevitable. They fought to win. But the enemy was far from broken. From the edge of the atmosphere, titanic shadows loomed, reinforcements. The invaders had not expected resistance, but now, challenged for the first time, they poured their full strength into the assault. Warships blotted out the heavens, a sea of steel and fire pressing down upon a single human vessel. General Vaynar watched from the Citadel's shattered command post, his heart hammering. "There are too many," he muttered, though he hated himself for the words. On the comms, the voice of the Aegis's commander crackled back, iron steady. "Numbers don't win wars, General. Will does. And humanity has never lacked for that." The words hit Vaynar like a blade through the fog. He turned to his soldiers, his voice sharp as steel. "Then neither do we. Arm every survivor. Every street becomes a fortress. Every ruin, a kill zone. If the humans are willing to bleed for us, we will damn well bleed beside them." A roar of approval thundered through the citadel. The hopeless defenders of Velar were gone, what stood in their place were warriors. Above, the Aegis unleashed its fury. Its flanks split open, revealing batteries that had yet to fire. With a sound like the wrath of the void itself, dozens of missiles streaked into the swarm of alien ships. Explosions blossomed across the night sky, tearing holes in the enemy formation. Fighters spilled from its bays, sleek and deadly, darting like wolves among lumbering cruisers. Yet for every enemy ship destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. Plasma fire rained down, striking the Aegis again and again. Armor buckled, shields screamed, decks shuddered. Inside, alarms blared. Still, the warship held the line. On the ground, the resistance surged with newfound strength. Human exo-soldiers moved like wraiths through the ruins, their weapons roaring, their movements a seamless dance of destruction. Valoran fighters mirrored their ferocity, hearts ignited by the impossible sight of humanity standing beside them. For the first time, they saw their enemy falter, not invincible gods of conquest, but fragile beasts capable of bleeding. The battle became a storm of screams and fire. Vaynar fought among his men, rifle in hand, his once pristine general's armor scorched and broken. Plasma bolts seared past him as he led a charge through the ruins of the eastern wall. Side by side with a Terran soldier, he cut down alien warriors, his voice raw as he shouted for his people to push forward. Every street ran red. Every building became a pyre. Yet still they fought. In orbit, the Aegis faced its reckoning. The enemy's flagship, a monstrous vessel larger than any seen before, advanced through the chaos. Its hull glowed with cruel light, weapons bristling, its silhouette a predator moving through a sea of carrion. The Aegis turned to meet it. "Target their flagship," the Terran commander ordered, voice low but unyielding. "End this here." The sky shook. The flagship unleashed its fury, plasma storms and rail barrages hammering the human vessel. The Aegis answered in kind, every cannon roaring, every missile streaking through the void. The two titans collided in a duel that shook the heavens, each blow a clash of civilizations. On the ground, all eyes lifted to the sky, watching the impossible battle unfold. For every Valoran soldier, every child hiding in the rubble, every soul clinging to hope, the Aegis had become more than a warship. It was salvation made steel. But salvation bled. Flames tore across its hull. Sections of its armor ripped free, spiraling into the void. Still it fought, refusing to yield. Refusing to abandon the world below. Then came the moment. The flagship charged its main weapon, energy coiling at its core, a shot powerful enough to shatter a continent. The Aegis's shields were gone. Its hull groaned under the strain. It could not withstand the blast. And yet, instead of retreating, the Aegis surged forward. Engines howled, its massive frame accelerating directly into the enemy's maw. Weapons flared, not in defense, but in a final, all-consuming strike. By the void, Vaynar whispered, watching in awe. They're going to ram it. The heavens split open. The Aegis fired everything in one blinding salvo. Missiles, rail cannons, beam weapons, all unleashed in a storm of annihilation. The flagship staggered, its shields collapsing, its armor cracking. And then, with a roar that shook the bones of every living soul below, the Aegis slammed into the enemy vessel. Light consumed the sky. The explosion was not a blast, but a sunrise. Fire blossomed across the heavens, tearing the flagship apart, scattering its fleet in chaos. Alien ships fled in disarray, their formation shattered, their will broken. The predators of the void had met something fiercer, and they recoiled in terror. When the light faded, silence fell. The flagship was gone. The enemy fleet, fractured and burning, fled into the depths of space. And where the Aegis had been, only debris drifted, glowing faintly in the void. On the ground, the Resistance and their human allies stood among the ruins, battered, bloodied, but alive. The invaders were gone. Velar Prime still stood. Yet the cost was carved into every survivor's face. They had seen the Aegis burn for them. They had watched humanity lay down steel and blood so that a world not their own might live. General Vaynar raised his eyes to the heavens, voice breaking as he spoke. They saved us. Beside him, a Terran soldier removed his helmet, his face streaked with soot and blood. His expression was weary, but fierce. The Aegis knew the risk. That's what it means to be human. Vaynar turned to him, eyes burning. Why? Why would you come for us? No one else did. The soldier's gaze was steady, his words carved from iron. Because no one deserves to face the void alone. The galaxy would remember. News of Velar's salvation spread faster than fire across dry fields. Whispers turned to shouts, shouts to rallying cries. Worlds that had bent their knees to tyranny raised their heads. For the first time in centuries, the predators of the void trembled. They had thought no help was coming. And then, from the darkness, humanity roared.